Hi, this is Nick from Paranormal Research Investigators UK in the next of our sequence of podcasts. This one carries on the theme of our perceptions, or our sense of perception, and it's sound. And as usual, Andy's here with me, so he's going to talk through and give us his regarded opinion on the paranormal and sound. So without further ado, here's Andy.
Good afternoon, Nick. Okay, I'm going to talk about sound today, and this is purely about paranormal activity that affects our ears, and then how we perceive the sound, and then what's reported afterwards to investigators and to other people. So just to make it very clear, we're not going to be talking about EVPs on this podcast, because that's an entirely different kind of subject matter altogether,
yeah.
And there's a lot of information to talk about on EVPs. So this is more about what this. We're going to talk more about what people hear through their own ears rather than what's recorded on tape.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start off by saying that people report that they hear disembodied voices of humans when they encounter paranormal activity. I've had a disembodied voice heard when I was 10 with my friend in the same room. We both were playing and quite happily having a good time. It was daylight, I think it was afternoon, nice bright day, and we were playing in the back bedroom, which we used it was a spare bedroom basically, so I could have all my toys, etc. in there. And what happened was we were both playing, and all of a sudden this real angry voice from the corner of the room up where the door was, near the top corner where the door entry is, shouted his name, and it was enough that I froze. My friend froze. I basically looked at him, he looked at me. I was the first to say it. I said, I've just heard someone shout your name.
Yeah.
But what I said first was, I've just heard your granddad. And he said, I know, I heard it. He was white as a sheet.
Right.
He didn't stay long after that.
And
he
of
went
course, his
home.
grandfather wasn't anywhere nearby. I mean,
No, his grandfather was still alive.
right. Okay.
And
interesting. Yes.
he lived probably about, I would say, maybe a 7-minute walk away.
Okay.
So he was another street completely.
Yes.
There's no way, even if he opened his door and shouted as loud as he could, there's no way it would travel all the way down to where I live.
Sure.
It was too far away.
Yes.
So that was interesting, because it wasn't like it was a deceased grandfather. His grandfather was still alive. So it was, the imitation of the voice was so spot on. We both heard it. However, that was, so that's an example that I've experienced personally.
Sure. Yes.
So when people talk about paranormal activity, they say they can hear muffled conversations.
Yep.
They can hear whispering. Growls are quite common and tend to be guttural growls.
Yes.
I mean, it's amazing how common they are, actually, growls.
Yes.
People report hearing a rasping, breathing voice, or breathing, but it's like sigh.
Yes.
People report hearing hisses, groans, hearing scratching, hearing dragging noises, things being moved around on the floor. They can hear furniture being dragged around.
Yes.
This is another common one as well, as footsteps. People tend to report footsteps being heard. People report hearing banging. Again, I've had a personal experience of two experiences. One was the rap that we heard in Tilbury Fort. That was interesting. And the other one I've experienced was in my bedroom. I think I was about 18 at the time. Nobody in the house all locked up. I was awake watching TV. Light was on in my bedroom. Downstairs, all the lights were off. And all of a sudden, there was a huge bang on my bedroom door. And when you freeze, when the body just goes into freeze mode. And then I kind of convinced myself, oh, I must have just misheard that. And then another bang, and I thought, right, I didn't mishear that.
Yeah.
And then, as if just one more to make sure, another massive bang on my bedroom door.
Wow.
And I just basically shit myself. Well, not literally, but I remember thinking, if I jump out the window, I can break a leg.
Yes.
But it's better, I was thinking, if that door opens, if that bedroom door opens,
I can imagine.
I would be literally jumping out the window
yes,
in my boxer shorts. So I was frozen. I was literally froze. I was watching the door handle. You know, as horror movies, where you think the door handle's going to move.
Yes.
And also above the door was this pane of glass. It was a sheet of glass.
Yeah.
And that went into the hallway. So anyway, obviously the hallway is dark, and I was just looking at the pane of glass, thinking, any minute now I'm going to see a pair of red eyes and I'm going to shit myself. So.
Yes.
But anyway, nothing happened. But the only thing that happened is I didn't sleep at all the rest of the night.
No, can imagine.
But I didn't open the door. I was too I was too scared to open the door.
Yes. Yes.
I sometimes wonder what would happen if I did open the door.
Yes.
Maybe nothing would have happened, but the whole house was locked up. My sister was away at the time in London, and what makes the story interesting is that when she came back, every time she went to the toilet during the night, she would put the landing light on,
sure.
and I remember asking her, woke me up, and I think I remember she said, well, she thought she saw something outside my door once, bedroom door, so she switches the light on.
Yes.
And so I've had personal experience of hearing 3 loud bang knuckle raps on my door, bedroom door. But we'll come on to alternative explanations.
Sure. Just going back to this thing about the type of sounds that people hear, and I guess claim to be a sign of a haunting or whatever. But it's the idea that quite often people hear groups. It's not just individual voices. I know one account that I heard was a house that's meant to be haunted, and it was an old house. I think it had a bit of a reputation. In fact, I think, and again, you'll have to excuse me because it's a bit vague, but I think it might have been a public house at one point, but converted. And it was the voice. It was as if there was a hubbub coming from down below, as if the pub or the bar, whatever, was being used as such. So that's quite interesting. I mean, again, it goes to that sort of throwback. It's a time and space thing, isn't it? Then.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah.
By the by.
Other sounds that people report are hearing tapping noises, hearing laughing. Laughter out of nowhere in different rooms, hearing sinister laughing, which can scare people. They can hear voices imitating people that are in the house.
Yes.
The husband could be at work or the wife could be at work, and whoever's in the house can hear them shout their name and say, come here, and then they look around, there's nobody there.
Yes.
And they can hear singing. People report hearing singing or musical instruments playing. Various musical instruments playing.
Whistling's another common one, isn't it?
Yeah, whistling. People report hearing distressed cries. And what's interesting is when you do these night visits and vigils, if you ever listen to some nocturnal animals, especially a badger. As you can hear from that, it's very sounds like someone's being murdered.
Sure.
Screaming.
Yeah, it's. I think the thing is that it's difficult. Sometimes people, they say, "I heard this screaming sound," and you think, well, and in fact, this happened on one investigation. Again, it was, I think it was Charlton House, and it was. A young lady said, "I just heard a scream. I just heard a scream." So, well, actually, what you've just heard is a fox. So, for anybody that's never heard a fox, again, here is a sound bite. it might seem incredible, but I think if you're in a high state of suspension because you're perhaps doing an investigation, you are going to perhaps think that is a scream. You might not imagine a fox can make a noise like that. So in some ways, it's almost a case of education, isn't it? And or background, where people have not come across these things before.
Absolutely. People report hearing clicking sounds just before paranormal activity. That's interesting because when you hear a clicking sound like that, it could be static electricity, but there seems to be a connection between popping and clicking sounds, particularly when people perhaps say if they've caught an EVP, they might hear a clicking sound before. I don't think anyone knows what that's about at the moment.
No.
Whistling, you mentioned.
Yes.
People talking in different languages. So, people, it doesn't, they can be in a room and hear another language being spoken, and they're wondering where's it's coming from.
Yes.
Basically.
I guess the thing is that there is an association. I mean, again, when you think of sort of poltergeist activity and exorcisms, then I think you automatically think of Latin. If you think of the film The Exorcist. So I guess it's the speaking in tongues. So there is an association there. I'm sometimes a bit sceptical about the idea that it's a foreign language, because unless the person can actually identify the foreign language or actually speaks it themselves, you might think it's a human articulating in a foreign language. But sometimes an element of doubt creeps in for me. But anyway.
People report hearing humming noises, or hearing someone as if they're in pain. People report hearing gunshot noises, rustling noises, like as if paper's being rustled around. Various loud sounds which seem outdated and not from our time period. So I think you touched on that earlier, where you can hear almost like the recording of an earlier time period where people were in the pub chatting away. Perhaps speaking slightly different Old English. Who knows? Probably drinking Old English.
I drink it all the time.
And that goes back into where's that sound coming from, that time period, and why are we hearing it? Another interesting thing is that sounds can sometimes feel like they're manufactured, as if they're kind of been orchestrated into a particular format. So you might, for instance, you might hear the sound of a china cabinet crashing to the floor and the glass, shattering and everything inside it being shattered, and then you go into that room and the china cabinet's perfectly fine.
Yes.
But you hear the sound of it.
Yes.
But you don't actually see.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a weird one, isn't it? Because you almost feel as though that could be one of your biggest fears, that your best china or your ornaments in that cabinet in the living room is going to topple over and it's all going to go. And sure enough, you hear it. It sort of conjures up some sort of idea that it could be some sort of psychological issue at play there. But it does seem to be quite common. The
reason why, as I said, it sometimes sounds can be manufactured is because this particular witness reported then they heard the china cabinet smash in another room.
Oh, okay.
Straight, a bit later.
Yeah.
And it was exactly the same crashing noise, exactly the same shattering.
Right.
So it wasn't like it was another china cabinet falling over and making a different noise.
Yes.
It was exactly the same. It's almost like is it playing? It's playing with you, isn't it? Playing a trick on you.
Well, that's it. Again, if it is some sort of entity that's having pulling your string, so to speak. I guess they're having a rare old laugh. But again, it to me. I mean, my sort of idea that there's sort of a time and space element to a lot of this would indicate that any sort of repetition is merely time and space at play. So therefore, perhaps it has happened in another dimension. I mean, that's another, I suppose, explanation, and it just breaks through into the existence that you have to your dimension. But certainly if it's repeating itself, that would suggest that there's some sort of time-space displacement.
And conversely, people can then see objects fall to the ground but make no noise.
Yes.
You know, a lamp could fall over but no sound was made.
Yes.
So again, that is strange. Where you would expect to hear a sound, you don't hear anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's again time-space displacement.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I've had personal experience in this house that I lived in with, a sort of strange shadow person with the red eyes, but I'm quite prepared to admit that could be dream state. But I did remember being awake around about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I could hear someone rattling in the plates downstairs in the kitchen.
Right.
You know, when you hear someone wash up in the sink.
Yes.
And you hear the plates clanging together, the cups, the plates, the pots.
That's quite a common one, isn't it?
It is, and it makes me wonder why that noise, why that particular noise, because why is it I can hear that in England and then someone in America can have the exact same experience of plates and pots being moved around, and then when they go to check, everything's normal, fine.
Yeah.
You know, why, what's going on? Why that noise? You know, why does it not do the Hoover sound?
Well, I suppose the thing is that, why would that be significant? I mean, does it have to be significant? Perhaps
well, I
not.
think it might be an OCD ghost who doesn't like dirty cups in the sink.
You know,
and maybe it likes to travel around the world.
Yes. But again, time space. If it's a time slip or something like that, is it just something that has happened or is happening? You know, again, this idea that time isn't linear, that everything is happening at the same time. Then perhaps these things do break through to your sense of perception of the current, the now.
So what I thought about is like it's an irritating noise. You know, it's not a soothing noise. It's not a noise you're going to lie back and enjoy.
Yes.
You know, it's something that's designed to make you feel like, you know, what the fuck is that? You know, it's keeping me awake.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not something that is. You feel it's not something there for your benefit. You feel like it's there to get a reaction out of you.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's an interesting point.
It is, and I think there are other things about sound and the paranormal, but again, when you talk about telephone calls from the dead, that's an entirely different topic, which is probably linked to EVPs as well.
Yes,
so,
I think so.
So I think we'll leave that for another podcast.
Sure.
I do want to talk a bit about some alternative explanations as to what sounds can be, because the bottom line is that most haunted reports are usually about sounds being heard in the house.
Yep.
They're the most common, basically. And I just want to basically state that the information that I'm about to provide is from this brilliant website called the Paranormal, the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena, ASAP. They're a charity that deals specifically with trying to understand the paranormal, but they're very good at having a scientific ethos and an ethical ethos. Try and get to a rational explanation about a lot of these experiences, and I think it's worth basically having a little discussion about that. And the information they have on their website is free for everyone to read. I do recommend that if you want to join ASAP, it's only £15 a year. You do get magazine and you get a lot out of the website. And I think if you've got a serious interest in the paranormal, or you think your house is haunted, have a look at this website. It might put your mind at ease.
Don't forget ours, by the way.
Absolutely, yeah. Contact us. Yeah, contact us. We're very amenable. We both have our own experiences. We don't judge people. You know, but we're more than happy to look at it and explore all the alternatives.
Sure.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what the articles that I'm going to read from. Some of the information has been written by a guy called Maurice Townsend, who was one of the original founders of ASAP, I think back in 1981. And he's got some very good, interesting points to consider when you think about the paranormal and sounds. Some of the most common sounds that he's identified are people talking, moving around, objects moving, animals, pets and uninvited wildlife. So when you think you've heard a paranormal sound, these are the kind of things that there could be. So obviously other people that are around but you're not aware of, animals that are around but you're not aware of, machinery, things like TVs, radios, sound equipment.
Yeah, I think the thing about electrical equipment is it's surprising how much electric equipment actually does give off a sound. You know, I mean, as soon as you switch it on, it's humming or something like that. So if it's touching something, you pick up vibrations, and of course that could be amplified for various reasons.
I was thinking of the magic wand.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's paranormal, but I think so. Yeah, so anything that vibrates would be something to bear in mind.
We'll quickly move on, I think.
Noises from outside, sounds coming in through windows, obviously, sounds coming through party walls, adjacent buildings.
Yeah, and the other thing about sound is the fact that you always imagine it is coming directly at you, but of course, you know, there are echoes. Sound can rebound. It can get amplified. And I think there's been studies recently to indicate that subsonic, I think that's Steve Parsons.
It's infrasound.
Yeah, infrasound. Yeah. This idea that it can be very disorientating. It's outside the sort of the usual frequencies, the 20 to 20,000 kilohertz that we can hear. That's our range, that sort of. But it can be disorientating, cause nausea, all sorts of things. So that's quite interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, Steve Parsons has written a book called Para-Acoustics.
Yeah.
And it's a very good book. Recommend you reading it, buying it. And
that's another plug.
He's done his own studies on it, and you know, it can cause internal experiences in people. I mean, a brief idea is that there's a certain frequency of sound, 19 hertz, I think, that can cause some visual disturbances or sensations in the body that people report as paranormal. So it's definitely worth considering that, because machinery can give off vibrations like we spoke about, and if it's at the right frequency and it's repetitive. The guy who first thought about it, Vic Tandy, I think it was from the fan. There was a fan on his ceiling.
Oh, right, yeah.
And he started to have the sensation that there was a presence in his lab.
Yes.
And he thought he could, out the corner of his eye, he could feel there was a apparition or something there. And he went through his whole lab, looked at his all equipment, trying to break it all down to think what could cause it. And then it turns out that I think it was the fan turning at a certain frequency. So, you know, that is again one explanation for paranormal sounds and the experiences that people can hear. And another one that's very common is sounds that are released from physical stress in the building or in the furniture.
Yes.
I think that's a huge one, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, as you know, one of my pet hates is when you do an investigation and every time there's a little noise, people are going, "Oh, say that again, do that again."
Creaks like creak, and did you hear that? That's a floorboard. That's a footstep.
Yeah. So I mean,
crazy.
So basically, you know, what's happening there is that the fabric of the material is throughout the day having pressure applied to it, heat, temperatures differ, and at some point, you know, there's going to be a release of pressure at some point, causing these creaks and noises and tapping sounds.
I think wood is probably the major culprit. I mean, you can certainly get some very loud banging sounds from wood as it twists and or releases from the twist, if it's, you know, as it contracts or expands, whichever way it's going. That's one thing. But then, you know, the fabric of a building can make creaking and cracking noises. So, you know, obviously, if your house is falling down, that's one thing, but it's just natural, and a lot of it is thermal. So at night, when things perhaps are cooling down, there will be more of these noises. The other thing that just reminded me, because my father used to play the piano, and he used to swear blind that sometimes the piano, it wouldn't sound as if it's playing a note, but obviously as the wood, I suppose, contracted in the evening, it would it would that noise would be amplified, and of course because piano strings, it would actually sort of almost resonate the strings. So you could perhaps, at a bit of a stretch, say that somebody had tried to play the piano. It was probably just one or two sort of bits of movement, but
probably
Beethoven's movement, no doubt.
Yeah,
Mozart.
well, it probably plays the piano better than me. The air pressure has probably got more rhythm than I have.
Yes.
And I think the thing about wood and floorboards is that, I mean, I've experienced this where I've been somewhere and I thought I could hear somebody walking maybe about 5 meters away from me. But the problem is with wooden floorboards is, because they're all connected to each other, the stress release, might happen at one end, but the noise might come at the other end.
Sure.
And so it might sound like it's coming from.
Yeah.
So you just got to be so careful.
And of course, the other thing, that one of the big culprits is going to be central heating.
Yeah.
I know perhaps a lot of people leave theirs on overnight, but if you don't, it will suddenly create a sudden drop in temperature. But of course, the other thing is that knocking pipes and plumbing. The number of people that must have thought that their pipes were being wrapped, and it was nothing more than an airlock or something like that. So it's not just the fabric; it is very much the mechanics and part of the building that could be creating these sounds as well.
And I think you touched on it before about sound as a pressure wave, being rebounded off things.
Yeah.
And often when you hear a noise, paranormal noise, it's often through a wall or in another part of the house. So that sound wave can be absorbed by the air and the material that it passes through. And what happens, can happen, is that it can lose part of its frequency.
Sure. It's filtered, isn't it? Really?
It's filtered.
Yeah.
And by the time you get to hear it, it can be distorted to the point where it sounds something different.
Yeah.
And you might interpret that as maybe whispering voices when it could be wind blown through a certain pipe somewhere else.
Yes.
But by the time it gets through the walls to you, it might sound like two people whispering.
And of course, talking of wind, and I pause, I hesitate. Of course, we make unwittering utterances. I mean, we make noises. You can probably hear me going whoa, 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 whoa. I think that as we talk, and even if we're just sort of standing still and there's nobody there, we might be going through things. And I know that I'm accused of this. I do say things to myself. I do talk to myself. But of course, then there's the gastric system. And it's surprising the strange sounds that can actually make, particularly if you're standing in a dark room and you're sort of tuning into whatever noises occur, and people say, "Did you hear that?" And somebody says, "Well, actually, it's my stomach," if they admit to it. And that can create some funny sounds as well.
Well, since we're talking about floorboards and walls and etc., there's something what's called the new house effect, and this is where, again, if you look on the website in ASAP, you'll see some information about this. And this is basically all buildings make noises, and they can usually be at the same time of day. Certain noises can be heard. However, if you're a visitor to the house and you sleep over, your brain is not used to hearing those particular noises. So in the darkness, you might think, "Oh, what's that? What's that noise? Oh, that sounds weird." Or that's a footstep outside. And sometimes haunting reports are not from the person who lives in the house, but from the visitor.
Yes.
And then that puts the suggestion out there to the person who lives there.
Yes.
And then that leads on to expectation. And if they believe the house is haunted, they are now going to listen for every single noise out there, and believe that is paranormal. And
of course, the other thing, just going back to that point about new houses, apart from the actual building itself finding its sort of natural sort of settlement, so to speak, don't forget you've got things like the plaster. It's still drying out. There's new houses are notorious for cracks in plaster work. Even the woodwork, it's got to start drying out a little bit more, isn't it, and create even more sound. So it's not just old houses that make creaks and groans, a new house will equally as well. So something to think about. And
also, you could live in a house and think it's not haunted and you get used to the sounds, but then if you do some renovation work, put some more, knock some walls out, put some more walls in somewhere else, you then create a new house effect.
Yes.
Whereby the building will start making some different noises.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point that one of the theories is that, of course, if you try and sort of, renovate or extend or do something with a property, the theory is that it does seem to stir up these sort of spirits, and I use that word in inverted commas. So actually there is an association between paranormal activity and renovation work or major works on the property, and that's very well documented in terms of the number of experiences that people have actually had.
I think it's a lot of the stress release sounds you have to be fully aware of. Interpret every sound as being unusual when really it would be more unusual not to have any noise at all in your house. That would be probably more paranormal if you had complete silence, basically.
Good point. Yeah.
Let's have a look. So wood is obviously what you mentioned is one of the most common of the fabric of buildings. If you think about other sounds, the thing about people whispering, again, I think we talked about water in pipes.
Yeah, that can sometimes make a very significant swishing sound, can't it? But again, could be distorted.
Groaning noises, they could be the wind.
As I touched on, alluded to earlier.
And when some people hear something and some people don't, I've had that recent experience or two before where me and my colleague were standing next to each other. We could hear metal pipes collapsing, crashing on the floor, and it sounded like two metal pipes just clanging and then crashing to the floor, and it was very loud. I mean, I thought someone had done something really serious inside this tunnel. I thought at first someone might be hurt. And when these three people came out the other exit of the tunnel, they didn't hear anything. And what was interesting is the people I was with behind me, who were only meters away, didn't hear anything either.
No, I was that person behind. So,
yeah. So I'm not saying it's paranormal, but for some reason it wasn't picked up on the recorders. We had a number of recorders inside, and because it was so loud, me personally, I was convinced that it would be on the recorder.
Yeah.
And I was very disappointed when it wasn't. Very disappointed.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that's about, basically. I mean, what I am glad is that I wasn't alone when I heard it. That means hallucination-wise, it wasn't just me hallucinating, unless me and Bradley just happened to be in the same area whereby a sound wave could reverberate off something and hit us, but not anyone else.
Sort of a rebound. But certainly it wasn't significant for the people standing about 10, 15 feet away from you, but a bit more than that.
So some other explanations about the fact that ghostly footsteps are quite commonly reported. These sounds could just be simple sounds which could be misinterpreted from sounds being absorbed by intervening walls. So when the noise is made, it comes through the wall, and it just happens to sound like someone moving around when it's not. But I think when it comes to the paranormal, obviously our hearing and our sight, which are probably our primary senses, are the ones that most people report in the paranormal activities, but they could also be the ones that are the most misperceived as well.
Yes, yeah.
So the sound and the paranormal is, we cannot rule out everything as being misperceptions or noises from the building, but we do definitely have to take into account that a lot of it probably is.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a fair comment. Right, sound. Have you got anything more to say, Andy?
I would only say that if you want to tune in for more sound advice, do the next podcast and listen to that one. But please do try and give some feedback if we've missed something or you don't understand something. We'll try and respond as soon as possible.
Yep, okay. As I say, sound advice, Andy. And we've been waiting to put that one in.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for listening.